Something a bit different, more colourful scene this time round. Wish me luck. Seems to be a common theme here, same asset start again. This time I can see the door, so we can see the scale of the thing. So I block out the door frame of the building in relation to how big my scale model is. I then block out the shape of the building itself and start working on the roof to the door frame, but also the roof of the building. I'm using very simple geometry to do this. Essentially a curved plane with subdivisions. I give this roof, or this plane rather, an extrusion, so I get some thickness to it, and I start adding in the supports that would hold it up. I also save my file. I'm now creating the platform that the building sits on. I put in some supports, link these together, and then start rotating them. I also start thinking about how we can get away with creating all this undergrowth. So I create a sphere and then duplicate this a couple of times and start pushing and pulling them into a larger shape. I then go back to the platforms and start adding in some detail, and in this case they look like logs and planks. I also give these a material. In this case it's a light brown, and then I just block out over my original platform so I have the right size. I then delete the original. I'm now creating a rock asset, and I do this by just creating a cube, scaling it up, and then beveling the vertices on the corners, pushing the geometry into each other, again to create those nice edging that the lighting will eventually pick up. And I give this a material as well. Once I'm happy with the shape, I generally duplicate the layer and hide the original in case I want to use it as a base mesh for sculpting later on. I then start blocking out the rest of the scene with these rocks to work out where the formations will be and where the waterfalls are. And then I add a half cylinder to make out the back of the waterfalls. I'm now thinking about the series of buildings in the background of the image, so I create some primitive building shapes. A rectangular one with a curved roof, a cylindrical building with a roof. I give the buildings themselves one material and change the material for the roof. And then start moving these primitive buildings around to better match where they are in the concept. At the moment these are all just floating in space, but that's fine. I then add a couple of buildings to the foreground behind the main building. I then start working up the platforms in the background of the image. How's this village across the way being held up? And then this bit's all about just working up, making an interesting shape from the platforms. It might not match the concept completely, but it's in the background and it will give us that extra bit of detail. I then start adding in planes to represent the water. Duplicate them onto the far side of the background village and make these thinner. It looks like these are kind of streaks of water. It's always good to have the camera open for this kind of thing. I then start blocking in the vegetation in the back of the image. Again, I just use the same clump that I used under the foreground building, and I scale, rotate, translate them to kind of look like the foliage is coming away from the rocky cliffs. And then where I see fit, I just grab some more rock meshes and put them in amongst the foliage spheres. Again, it's that extra bit of detail that you get poking through, but without having to detail it up. Continue doing this at the far back of the image. And then bring them to the foreground. I create some spheres at the very front of the camera so that I can better control what that looks like. And then coming in to do more of a detailed pass on the front of the main building, adding in supports that would be at the front of the building, holding up the fabric roof. I then add in a tree trunk shape, again just to match to the concept. And then there's a washing line on the left foreground near the main building. So I start blocking in the poles and lines for this. It's very, very simple geometry. I give the rope a different material and subdivide it so that I get a smoother look. I then start adding planes that will be the washing. I'm now creating a gobo, and this is from the film industry, and basically it's a plane or an image that sits in front of the camera and projects the silhouette into the scene, so I'm using it to give that impression of foliage above with light falling through it. I also add a bit more detail to the inside of the hut and bring out and boolean the window so we can see the water behind. I'm now playing about with how I can tint the materials of the scene. Now I don't find it in this video, but the material, what would you call it, node I'm looking for is called variation texture, and essentially what this would do is you can change it to look at the mesh part and then change the colours, and then Modo works out which mesh part is being used where and gives each one a different colour depending on what you've chosen. I'm now extending those gobos across the scene and repositioning my light. And as you can see in the render, we're now getting shadow in with some light picking through in places. I'm now looking at how I can break up the foliage a bit more, these spheres, and what I do is I choose some of the spheres and give them a new material and put a surface generator in there. Again, I use a replicator and a low polygon shape to put in some foliagey bits. I then add some fog. Again, this is more testing of why isn't it working when I actually am using the wrong node. And now I'm tweaking the colours to better match the concept. And that's another one done.
Thank
thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, then please like, comment and subscribe. And for more game art related content, check out the other videos on my channel. See you next time.